Greetings, Cheapskate Nation, and welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Cheapskate, and welcome to Season 2 of It Came From the Sump, our series dedicated to the Necromunda Community Event, co-hosted by Dr. Drybrush and myself. It Came From the Sump is a vehicle-based narrative Necromunda campaign set in the Sump Sea of Necromunda. And on today's episode, Battle Report number 6, my two friends Dark Lord Mac as well as my little sister the Kiddo will be throwing it down in a border dispute scenario to the death. These two gangs are actually rip-roaring and ready to go. Dark Lord Mac managed to win his very first battle report for our campaign, whereas the Kiddo lost hers. But the Kiddo is hungry. She wants to be able to prove herself on this battle report, so they're going to throw it down to see exactly which of them is exceptionally deadly. Now, because this video is a little bit more of a deeper dive, I will put timestamps in the description box down below, so that we click and navigate to the part of the video that interests you the most. So that being said, we're going to play some background music real quick. As the music is playing, we'll show you rosters for both gangs, and we'll come back for deployment as well as scenario rules.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
So the scenario for this battle report is border dispute. The battle type is under high battle with no vehicles or mounted fighters allowed, and it will take place on a Zone Mortalis battlefield. Now for the crews, players choose D3 plus 3 fighters and the rest are considered reinforcements. Now the players will take random turns selecting one fighter from the random crews and deploying them within 1 inch of the battlefield center. Afterwards, the players will then set up their gangs normally, and players will set up their gang relic within their own half of the battlefield that must be at least 5 inches away from any table edge. Now the game tactics on this one, there is no game tactics on this one, but the voiceless choir is in effect. For the trigger words, for the Kiddo, her famous saying is "wait, what?" She always says that whenever she gets confused about stuff. And Dark Lord Mac, his baby needs a new pair of shoes whenever he rolls a dice. However though, because my two friends have watched the other two battle reports that have taken place up to this point, they know that there is a trigger word event, and oddly enough, they both maintain a lot of discipline in this one, and they didn't actually trigger it this time around, which is actually quite interesting. Now for the ending of the battle, only one side has fighters left in the battlefield will determine when the battle ends. For the victory condition, if only one side remains, one side has a gang relic that is not defiled, otherwise it's considered a draw. Now for the gang relics in this battle report, they actually give you +2 to their cool as well as the leadership for all friendly fighters within 6 inches. In order to defile the enemy relic, all you have to do is take a devil action. You must be within 1 inch of the relic, and if they do that, then the relic of course no longer gives bonuses. As for reinforcements, at the start of each end phase, D3 random fighters are deployed as reinforcements. For fleeing the battlefield, if a gang voluntarily bottles out, the relic is automatically defiled, and the winner randomly chooses a fighter to earn the bonus. Now for the rewards on this one. Winners earn D6 times 10 credits and add it to their stash, and in the case of a draw, they earn D3 times 10 credits. For experience, all members actually participating in the battle report gets +1 experience point. You get D3 experience point for the fire defiles the enemy gang relic, and the victorious gangly earns additional D3 experience even if they didn't participate in the battle report. As for reputation, the gang who loses their relic being defiled, they lose 3 points reputation. For the gang who actually ends up defiling the enemy relic, they actually earn D3 points reputation. Both gangs earn 1 point reputation for fighting each other for the very first time, and if any gang bottles out, they lose 1 point reputation. So the scenario rules over with, let's go on and talk about deployment real quick. So let's talk about deployment real quick, and I do have to apologize at the very beginning of this video. The reason why is because I forgot to take photos of the close-ups of the different fighters on the board, so I do apologize on that one. So we do have to use this overhead map in order to illustrate where everyone is deployed at. But hopefully this overhead map will actually do a good job of explaining what happened on the tabletop. Now as you can see here, my friends decided to divide the tabletop diagonally across the board, and that's what that magenta line represents, is the border between both of these gangs. Dark Lord Mac decided to claim the upper left-hand corner for his side of the battlefield, while the kiddo took the bottom right-hand corner for hers. Now, as you can see on both sides of the battlefield, on either side of the map, we have keys for both sides. The Everdamned are represented by the color yellow in this mini-map, while the Snow White and the Wild Seven are represented by the teal color on the right-hand side of the map. Now, my friends decided to deploy their relics on opposite corners of the battlefield. For the Everdamned, they deployed theirs in the top left-hand corner, as represented by that R yellow circle, and for the Snow White and the Wild Seven, they did the bottom right-hand corner, as represented by the R with the teal circle in it as well. Now for the Everdamned, pretty much for their deployment, they actually have a little bit of advantage on this one because they have a couple of initiates who do have Infiltrate, which means they can come in after the deployment is over with. So right smack dab in the top of the upper left-hand corner is Crankjaw, which is one of the Narco Scum. On the bottom left-hand corner, represented by the 1, we have Boulevard, which is the Cutter. Number 2 is Griver, which is one of the I believe they're called Skinners, is what they're actually located there. And on kind of like in the middle of the table is player number 3, which is Cancel the Cleaver. That's the randomly chosen fire that actually had to be in the 1 inch of the center. Number 4 on the bottom right is actually Garrote, which is one of the initiates, and in the top right hand corner, number 5 is the Fire Worm, which is another one of the initiates as well, who use Infiltrate in order to get to those points of the battlefield. Now as for my little sister, the kiddo, player number 3 on the center of the table, that is actually Doc. One of our fighters was randomly chosen to be within 1 inch of the center. Right next to him, behind him, is player number 2, which is Sleepy, as well as number 5, which is Dopey. And then, of course, in the center of the bottom right-hand corner, 1 and 4 is Happy, as well as Bashful. And then, of course, we have our relic there on the right-hand side. And that pretty much makes the deployment for this one. And I do apologize for not taking photos of the close-ups. With that, we go directly to the top at turn number 1. Both Dark Lord Mac as well as the kiddo roll for initiative to see which of them will be going first. In this situation, the Corpse Grinder cults managed to snag the initiative, so they will be going first in this battle report. So for Dark Lord Mac's very first activation, it activates Canto the Cleaver, which is brand new skin of the manager recruit in the last round of the game. And as you can see, it's got a beautiful line of sight directly into Doc, which is the Venator Hunter, who's also Squat Hunter. So because that Dark Lord Mac actually declares a charge with Canto the Cleaver, he rolls his D3, rolls a perfect 6 on that one, so he gets a 3-inch action charge to go directly against Doc. And as you can see, this little mini map in the center of the battlefield, you can see Canto the Cleaver. If you'll notice, that gray circle is now grayed out for Canto the Cleaver, and I decided to do that because I wanted to show that which players have been activated, which ones have not. So if you see that little gray circle, it means that fighter has been activated and they're currently carrying out their action for the little mini map to kind of help you see how the battlefield is flowing. So as you can see, Canto the Cleaver has no problem charging directly into Doc the Squat Hunter as well, so the two of these characters do throw down in close combat, and because Canto the Cleaver managed to get the charge off first, he'll be striking first. So Canto the Cleaver is targeting Doc, and he is armed with a 2-handed axe, and combined with his base attack of 1 attack, plus 1 for charging, and additional attack for his Berserk skill, he ends up with a grand total of 3 attacks in total, and he's also striking at weapon skill 3 as well. Now he is using a 2-handed axe, which does have the versatile trait, which is quite nice, but unfortunately for him though, it does suffer a -1 to hit penalty, so because of that he will be striking at 4+ in order to hit Doc. Dark Lord Mask takes his pool of 3 dice and throws and manages to score 3 hits with all 3 attacks going directly into Doc as well. Now the two-handed axe does give him a modifier of +2 to his strength characteristic and also causes 2 damage as well. So because of that, Canto the Cleaver will be striking at strength 5 with 2 damage for each one of those hits, and Doc of course have a toughness of 4 for being a Ironhead Squat prospector. So because of that, Canto the Cleaver has to roll a 3+ in order to wound against Doc. He does manage to land 2 wounds directly against Doc, so because of that, my sister, the kid, has to roll an armor save for Doc with a 5+. Unfortunately for her, though, she fails both of her armor saves, so because of that, it cuts right through the mesh armor for Doc and actually puts 4 damage directly onto the Venator Squat Hunter. Unfortunately for the kiddo, Canto the Cleaver does finish him off with a coup de grace, mounting a couple of serious injuries as well as a flesh wound directly onto Doc. Because of that, Doc does go to out of action. When they roll the d6 to see exactly what ended up happening to him, they roll the Bitter 14, which is the Bitter Anemone. So basically that means that Doc now has the Berserker skill every single time he fights against Corpse Grinder cults, and he makes a full recovery as that as well. So not only does he go out of action, but he does make a full recovery, so no harm, no foul there, and he also gets Berserker skill now, which is actually quite cool. So as you guys can see in the mini map there, we also now have blacked out for Doc because it represents the fact that he's been taken out of action. You see his name on the right hand side has also been illustrated in red. Now because they did manage to take out Doc so close towards his allies, both Dopey as well as Sleepy will need to take cool tests to see if they end up sticking around. Sleepy has a cool characteristic 6+, so because he passes his willpower test, no problem whatsoever. Dopey also has a 6+ for his cool as well, but unfortunately for the killer though, Dopey fails his cool test, so because of that he breaks his nerve and he flees. So because of that, Dopey flees back 4 inches heading directly towards the wall. At the same time, he also loses ready marker because now he is considered broken. So unfortunately for the kiddo, that one attack was actually quite devastating. Managed to take out one of her fighters, and at the same time also make one of her fighters break as well. And she doesn't have very many on the tabletop to begin with. So here's Dopey, of course, fleeing directly to the bottom right-hand corner of the battlefield, moving away, losing his ready marker as well. He will get a chance to actually regain his nerve during the end phase, but until then, though, he's completely useless up to this point. If you also notice in the previous map as well, I also put a white circle around Dopey to represent the fact that this character's nerve is broken, and he will not be participating for the rest of this round. So not to be outdone, the kid decides to activate her player number 2, which is Sleepy, which is her Venator Hunter who's armed with a needle gun, and actually decides to activate that character and actually has to take a shot directly at Canto the Cleaver. Sleepy has a couple of advantages for him, of course. One of the first things, of course, he's armed with a needle rifle, so because it's a very devastating weapon. At the same time, it's also shooting at close range behind cover, so everything is in his favor. So because of the kid decides to take a basic action for Sleepy in order to aim his weapon to get +1 to hit, because she wants to make sure that she doesn't miss this shot, and another basic action, open fire with a needle rifle. So as you can see here, Sleepy decides to target Canto the Cleaver. Sleepy has a ballistic skill of 4+, and with a needle rifle, he gets +2 to hit because of short range. At the same time, she also took a +1 to hit with the aim action, just because she was afraid of the cover that she was hiding behind would actually provide a partial cover for Canto the Cleaver. That wasn't the case though, but you never could be sure, so the kid decided to take some caution on that one. So because of that, with all of her bonuses together, she needs to roll a 2 up in order to hit. All she needs to do is not roll a 1 in order to score and land against Canto the Cleaver. And of course, she has no problem whatsoever actually making that shot against Canto the Cleaver. Canto the Cleaver, of course, has his armor save, but unfortunately for him, though, he fails his armor save. So because of that, the shot does wound, and because the needle rifle does have toxin trait, all the kid has to do is beat Canto the Cleaver's toughness of 3+. So because of that, she has to throw a 3 up in order to wound, and she'll be able to put an injury die directly onto Canto the Cleaver. And that's exactly what she ends up doing. She managed to put a serious injury directly onto Canto the Cleaver, so because of that, he kind of runs forward, gets hit square in the chest with a chemical dart. He looks down. By the time he has time to register, he gets put away to the nighty-night time by the nighty-night gun belonging to Sleepy. So he is snoozing away right now in the middle of the battlefield, which is a really bad spot to be in. And as you can see from this mini-map, we basically put a red circle around Canto the Cleaver to represent the fact that he is now seriously injured, which is quite bad because all anyone has to do is charge into him, and they can take him out of action with a coup de grace. So going back to the other side of the board, my buddy Dark Lord Max decides to activate the Fireworm, which is basically fighter number 5 on his list. As you can see, the Fireworm has a grayed out circle representing the fact that he is being activated. And he takes a basic action, open fire with his Hand Flamer directly at Dopey, which is player number 5 with the whiteout circle on the minimap as well. You can also see that little flame template that we kind of put down there on the minimap as well to represent that action. So here's a close-up of the Fireworm, which is one of the brand new initiates that Dark Lord Mac recruited in this previous round of the campaign. He's armed with a Hand Flamer as well as a Boning Sword, so because of that, Hand Flamer's got a perfect line of sight directly on Dopey, and he basically cuts loose. Now, luckily for Dark Lord Mac, he is targeting Dopey, and the Hand Flamer, of course, automatically hits because template attacks do automatically hit their targets as well. So because we go straight to the wound wall in this one, he does have a strength of 3 for the Hand Flamer against Dopey's toughness of 4, so because he is kind of rolling the wound on a penalty, so he has to roll a 5 up in order to wound against that Abyssal Frame and Rig Hand. Unfortunately for Dark Lord Mac, though, he does kind of fail to wound the fighter, so because that Dopey is perfectly fine. However, though, he did manage to put a Blaze Test directly onto Dopey, so because that Dopey has that Null Blaze icon right next to him, so because that he could be put on fire as well. And for his second action, the Fireworm, of course, just takes a simple movement to move around the corner on the top of the table, just so that way he's out of the line of sight of being shot at by Dopey or any other Venator in case they want to take retaliatory shots against him. So here's an overhead shot of the entirety of the tabletop. As you can see, Dopey now has a bright orange circle wrapped around his symbol to represent the fact that he is currently blazed as well. So poor Dopey, man, managed to get pinned, currently on fire, at the same time cannot reactivate until they actually get to the end phase where he can recover his nerve. As you can see as well, player number 5, which is the Fireworm, just kind of ducks around the corner just to get out of the line of fire for the most part. So with that, the character decides to activate next, and there's a group activation with both Happy as well as Bashful. Happy is, of course, a Venator Hunt champion, so because it is a group activation with Bashful, and both those guys decide to take simple movements or to climb the ladder in order to get closer to the Gang Relic. As you can see in this close-up, Bashful does a simple movement forward first to get on top of the bridge, looking over the entirety of the battlefield, and of course, Happy also follows suit next. Now, unfortunately for the killer, though, Happy will not be able to take any other actions really unless there's another movement action, just because he is packing a mining laser and doesn't have a dispenser on that mining laser. So that mining laser does take a double action in order to shoot. So here's a shot of the mini-map on the battlefield. As you can see, players number 4 as well as number 1 have been grayed out to represent the fact that both Happy and Bashful have been activated. As you can see, they moved the ladder to go directly on the top of it. Now, while Happy may not be able to do anything because he is packing a mining laser and it takes a double action to fire that weapon, Bashful, though, can still take an action. So because of that, for Bashful's second action, he decided to take a shot with his long rifle directly against Bolivar, which is the cutter who's on the far left-hand side of the battlefield. Now, he does, of course, have to pass a willpower test in order to shoot at Bolivar because of the terrifying special rule that's attached to his cutter's mask as well. So because of that, he will need to pass that willpower test of 6+. Of course, Bashful has no problem passing that willpower test, so because of that, he can target Bolivar normally. So because that Bashful is targeting Bolivar with a ballistic skill of 4+, he's also armed with a long rifle, and he has a +1 to hit with the long range. I do apologize, I accidentally put needle rifle instead of long rifle. He is packing a long rifle with an infrared sight. However, though, he is not aiming with that infrared sight because he's just taking a basic action open fire, so the only additional bonus he gets is knockback. Now, because he is firing at long range, he does get a +1 hit modifier to his long rifle, so because of that, in order to land that shot, the killer needs to roll a 3+ in order to hit that shot against Bolivar. The killer actually lands that shot no problem. Actually, she rolls a 5 on that one, so because not only does she manage hit Bolivar, but she also triggers knockback as well, which means she also generates an additional point of damage with the long rifle. So the long rifle now is striking at strength 4 with -1 AP and causing 2 damage now because knockback has been triggered. Bolivar only has a toughness of 3, so because of that, the killer needs to roll a 3+ in order to wound Bolivar. So she manages to wound Bolivar as well, so Bolivar does have an armor save of 4+ because he does have an armor undersuit combined with his plate mail as well as his cutter's mask. He loses 1 point of armor protection though because of AP1 on that long rifle, so because he has to roll a 4 up in order to save, but unfortunately for my buddy Dark Lord Mac though, he fails that armor save. Luckily for my friend Dark Lord Mac, though, Boulevard does not go to action. In fact, he actually suffers a serious injury, so because of that, with that shot directly to his chest, Boulevard goes crashing face first into the cold hard decking and is currently bleeding out and at the mercy of anyone around him. Now, unfortunately, this also means that Griver, the hooded one, does have to take a cool test, which is one of Dark Lord Mac's skinners. Now, he does have a cool characteristic of 7+, and he does manage to pass his cool test, so because of that, no negative effect happens for Griver, the hooded one. And you can see in this updated minimap now, my buddy Dark Lord Mac has two seriously injured fighters on the tabletop. The first one is Canto the Cleaver, player number 3, which is Mac down in the middle of the board, as well as player number 1, Boulevard, which is his cutter. So things are not looking very good right now for Dark Lord Mac. Going back to Dark Lord Mac, he decides to activate Garrote, one of his initiates, and his initiate does a double movement directly towards the northern end of the battlefield in order to support Canto the Cleaver. So there's an overhead shot of the mini-map. As you can see, fighter number 4, Garrote, has been grayed out because he's been activated. He moves double his movement allowance to go directly towards Canto the Cleaver in the middle of the tabletop, so that way he can render first aid during the end phase in order to help Canto the Cleaver to recover. And there's a close-up Garrote, of course, rendering first aid to Canto the Cleaver. And who says that friendship doesn't exist in the Underhive of Necromunda? So going back to the kiddo's next activation, she decides to activate Dopey, which one of her fighters has not been activated yet. And unfortunately, Dopey, of course, is suffering from the Blaze condition. So the first thing he has to do, of course, is to take a Strength 3 hit with -1 AP, also causing 1 damage as well. Now looking for the kiddo, though, she does not take any damage from the flames, but however, though, she does flee back 9 inches straight towards the back of the battlefield. And as you can see in this photo, Dopey does go back 9 inches and crashes directly onto the cold hard decking, currently pinned, and at the same time also still has his nerve still being broken, but that puts him dangerously close towards the to the fireworm, which is located right above him. And here's a close-up of the map. As you can see, player number 5, of course, goes rocketing to the north of the battlefield, taking position there, and is currently pinned right now. But luckily for the kiddo, though, Dopey did manage to put out the flame, so he will not be taking any more damage for this round. For Dark Lord Mac's very last activation, he decides to activate Griver. So Griver is one of the fighters that he has left over, so he decides to actually have him move directly towards Boulevard, so that way he can render first aid to Boulevard, but he moves in such a way so that way he's also behind cover too, so in case any Venators try to take a long shot at him, he's got some cover in order to protect him from being shot at. So there's an overhead shot of the entirety of the battlefield. As you can see, fighter number 2, which is Griver, just kind of moves up north and hiding behind those little walls there in the middle of the section of the table so that way he doesn't get shot at. And there's a close-up of Griver getting ready to render first aid for Boulevard and also using those little shield walls there in order to protect himself from being shot at. And for Dark Lord Mac's very final activation, he decides to activate Crankjaw, which is one of his narco scums located in the upper left-hand corner of the battlefield. As you can see, this basically does a simple action order to move out directly towards that door to look at the right-hand side, and another basic action order to open that door using the control panel. So here's a close-up of Crankjaw. As you can see, is a normal narco scum from the Kim Fiends, which is the Narco Lords Alliance that Dark Lord Mac has taken on. This guy's got flak armor as well as a last pistol and funny knife, as well as frag grenades as well. And just like we talked about earlier, as you can see, Crankjaw does a simple action move towards our terminal, another simple action to open up the door, and now that corridor is fully wide open, so that way he can go directly towards Sleepy if he wants to. And here's an overhead shot of the entirety of the battlefield. As you can see, that little white bar in the middle of the table, that represents the fact that that door is now completely open, so that way that corridor is open at the same time. And oddly enough, that also takes us to the end phase. So here's an overhead shot of the entirety of the battlefield. As you can see, all the fighters are on the tabletop have been grayed out because they have been activated. Unfortunately for my buddy Dark Lord Mac, though, he's got 2 fighters who are seriously injured, with our Boulevard as well as Canto the Cleaver. Now, at the beginning of the end phase, of course, both my friends roll off their battle to see anybody actually flees the battlefield. My buddy Dark Lord Mac does manage to pass that. Same thing with the kiddo as well. So because of that, we go directly to the recovery rolls. Starting with Dark Lord Mac, Boulevard does make a flesh wound on his recovery roll, so because he does flip over, he is currently pinned right now, but he also means he can still fight in the battlefield. Unfortunately, though, he does take a flesh wound, means he's now toughness 2, which makes it easier to wound, but he can still move, he can still fight, he's still very much dangerous, and you can never underestimate corpse grinders as long as they can do that. And the same thing ends up happening for Canto the Cleaver. They actually rolled the injury dice on this one, got a serious injury as well as a flesh wound, so my buddy Dark Lord Mac thought that was better for Canto the Cleaver. So he does lose 1 point of toughness, which makes it easier to wound, but Canto the Cleaver can still fight with that two-handed axe of his. He's still very much a threat. So here's an overhead shot at the end of the tabletop, at the end of the end phase here for the recovery. As you can see, both Bolivar and Canto the Cleaver have been filled in with the color orange. That's to represent the fact that they are currently pinned right now. And if you also notice too that their little icons also have a red circle around it, and that's to represent the fact that these guys have flesh wounds on them as well. So that makes it a little bit easier for you guys to see how the battlefield conditions have developed over the course of the battle. And because this is the end phase of turn number 1, both my friends receive reinforcements for this turn. The kiddo only got 1 fighter coming into her list, but that 1 fighter was Snow Whiteline Nightmare Vestia, which is Escher Hunt Leader, who's got a mesh armor, a needle pistol, servo claws, well, stiletto sword. She's also got Iron Will, and she also has a telepathy skill with Fearful Aura as well as mind control. As for Dark Lord Mac, he rolled up his 2 fighters show up, and he got the last 2 members of his alliance with the Narco Scum. Managed to get Needle Vex, which is his Kim Fiend fighters armed with mesh armor. He's also got a last gun with a telescopic sight, as well as a stub gun. And the other fighter is Ashra the Drip, which is another Narco Scum from the Kim Fiend. She's got flak armor as well as a last gun, as well as photo goggles. And oddly enough, these are the last 3 fighters from the Narco Scum he'll be able to get. But that's because when he rolled up for his D3 plus 2 to see how many Narco Scum he got, he rolled a 1, so they got 3 fighters for this alliance. And with that, that takes directly to the end of turn number 1. As you can see, here's an overhead shot of the entirety of the battlefield. The Ever-Damned, of course, are getting more fighters swarming in on the left-hand side of the tabletop. Snow White as well as the Wild 7, they got some problems, but they're in pretty good defensive positions to lay down some overwatching fire directly onto the Corpse Grinders. She's also getting really lucky so far passing a willpower test in order to launch those shots directly against her enemies, so she is actually doing quite well. So at the end of turn number 1, we go directly to the top of turn number 2, and both of my friends roll off for priority to see which of them has initiative. So we go directly to the top of turn number 2, my 2 friends roll off, and my little sister kiddo managed to get the initiative on this one, so the Venators will be going first in the top of turn number 2, and it's time for some payback for her enemies. And the very first thing that my little sister decides to do is to activate her leader, Snow Whiteline Nightmare Vestia, who's located on the bottom center of the tabletop. So, Snow Whiteline Nightmare Vestia, of course, is going to use a basic action in order to cast Mind Control directly onto Griver. She's within 9 inches, as well as line of sight of Griver as well. Just barely, but she does manage to see him right past that pillar. She does have willpower characteristic 6+, which she managed to pass no problem, and managed to put Mind Control directly onto that poor butcher. So there's a close-up of Griver the Hooded One. As you can see, he's a skinner who's armed with paired butcher's chain cleavers, and he's looking over the bleeding body of his friend Bolivar. And unfortunately, the intrusive thoughts start entering his mind because he wonders, I wonder what would happen if I struck my cutter with my 2 chain glaives. What would actually happen from that? So because of it, we go directly to Griver, who is now under mind control, decides to launch an attack with a basic fight action against Bolivar. He gets 2 attacks, 1 attack base, but he also gets additional attack because he's got paired weapons on his hands. Now, he doesn't actually get to take advantage of the paired trait because he's not charged into close combat, so he has 2 attacks, but he's still striking at weapon skill 3, and he also needs 3 up in order to hit Bolivar with those paired butcher chain cleavers. Unfortunately for Dark Lord Mag, both those hits do manage to land their mark against Bolivar, so because that Griver now has a strength of 4, because he gets +1 strength from those Butcher Chain Cleavers, minus 2 AP, as well as 2 damage with a Shred characteristic as well. Bolivar does have a toughness of 2 now because he has Flesh Wound, which means now that Griver needs to roll a 2 up in order to wound. And both hits actually do wound, and actually one of those attacks does trigger Shred, which means that now striking at minus 4 AP. So because of that, Bolivar's armor save, he does have an armor undersuit as well as plate armor and the Cutter's Mask. However though, with that minus 4 AP, he's rolling 6+ in order to save his wound, as well as a 5+ as well. Now unfortunately for Bolivar, he does fail his 5+ wound roll, but he does manage to pass a 6-up armor save, so that part is quite nice, but still gets 2 damage put directly onto the poor Cutter. So the kiddo does pick up both injury dice and rolls and manages to get an out-of-action result, putting an out-of-action result of 24 directly onto Bolivar. So because that Bolivar does go out cold, so he no longer participates on the battlefield. However, though, he does manage to make a full recovery, which is great for him. Now, unfortunately for Griver, though, he does need to take a cool test because one of his friends just went out of action, and to make matters worse, he was the one who actually did it. Horrified by the way he's done, with post-traumatic stress disorder triggering inside of his brain for all the damage he did to his own best friend, he does have to take a cool test in order to see if he actually sticks around. Now, unfortunately for my buddy Dark Lord Mac, even with a 7+ on the cool, he fails it. So because of that, Griver is horrified by the things he has done, and he actually flees 8 inches away. So here's an overhead shot of the entirety of the battlefield. As you can see, Boulevard has been blacked out now, and his red has been highlighted red because he is out of action. And to make matters worse, Griver has also lost his nerve, so because he is put a whiteout on that one to make it look like, to let you guys know that he is actually no longer participating until the end phase. And Griver flees 8 inches to the right hand side, right next to Garrote, as well as Canto the Cleaver, running away, trying to, what have I done? Screaming directly to the heavens as he runs directly away from his, sliced up body of his best friend Boulevard. And here's an overhead shot of the entirety of the battlefield. As you can see, Griver made that long dash away from the battlefield over to the right-hand side as well. But the crazy part is, though, that the leader, Snow White, isn't done. That was actually just her first basic action. She's going to take another basic action to cut loose with her needle pistol. As you can see in this photo, Snow White Line Nightmare Vestia does have a perfect line of sight directly towards Garrote, and she's going to take her needle pistol and take a basic action to open fire with that needle pistol directly against that unsuspecting initiate. So because that needle pistol, she is targeting Garrote, who's on the very far side of the battlefield there. She has a Blizzard skill 3+. She actually doesn't get any bonuses to hit with her needle pistol, so she does a 3+ in order to hit, which of course she's going to do so successfully. So a Flechette Dart goes zipping across the battlefield and nails directly into Garrote. So because of that, also triggers a ammo test in order to do that as well. I forgot to mention that. The kiddo does manage to pass her ammo roll, no problem, with a perfect 6. So because of that, her ammo roll is still good for her needle pistol. She can still shoot later on. Now the needle pistol, of course, has a -1 AP on that one. Now Garrote, of course, has Initiate's Mask as well as Flak Armor, which normally gives him a 5 armor save, but that -1 AP, though, does drop it to an armor save 6 up, and unfortunately for Garrote and for Dark Lord Mac, Garrote fails his armor save. So because of that, as you can see, Garrote, of course, has a toughness of 3 up, and the needle pistol does have the toxin trait. So in order for the kid, in order to make that toxin trait trigger, she needs to roll a 4 up on her wound roll, which she managed to get no problem whatsoever. So the kiddo, of course, does roll the injury dice on this one. Actually, it's an out of action result. So because of that, Garrote does go falling face down on the ground and suffers a convalescence roll. So because he will go into recovery and he will miss out on his next battle report. Now, unfortunately, what this does, of course, it causes another nerve test for Canto the Cleaver as well as for Griver. Now, Griver this time does manage to pass his nerve test. However, Canto the Cleaver, even with the 7+ cool, not so much. I believe Canto the Cleaver actually travels 7 inches to the right hand side, running right past Sleepy and also collapsing once again right there in the upper right hand corner where Dopey was earlier. Just this access point, man, it's a really bad place for people. So here's already shot of the entirety of the map. As you can see as well, Canto the Cleaver, of course, is now whited out as well because he lost his nerve. So unfortunately for my buddy Dark Lord Mac, he's lost 2 fighters. He's got 2 fighters who failed their cool tests, and his nerves are broken. Things are not going very good right now for the Everdamned. So in response of all this chaos taking place on the battlefield, Dark Lord Mac decides to activate the Kim Fiend Crankjaw and declares a double action charge against Sleepy because he's directly to his flank. The reason why he does that because if he manages to get to Sleepy in the back or on the flank, he can take advantage of the backstab weapons trait for his fighting knife that he's equipped with. So because of that, when he rolls for the charges, it rolls a 5. So because he gets a grand total of 8 inches in total, and Crankjaw, of course, has no problem making the connection, going right behind Sleepy, just so that way he can get that action directly against him in close combat, and taking full advantage of that backstab trait with his fighting knife. So here's a close-up of the overhead shot of the entirety of the map. As you can see, fighter number 6 is Crankjaw, who's been grayed out. He basically charges across from that little upper left-hand corner, goes directly behind fighter number 2, which is Sleepy for the Snow White and the Wild 7. Now, Crankjaw actually gets 3 attacks in this close combat attack against Sleepy. He gets 1 for a base, of course. He's got 1 for charging and 1 for additional hand weapon, which gives him 3 attacks in total. He decides to make 1 attack his last pistol and the other 2 his fighting knife. And with a weapon skill of 4+, all he needs to do is roll a 4 up in order to hit. Dark Lord Mac actually managed to land 2 hits, striking once with his last pistol as well as once with his fighting knife. Now his fighting knife does have backstab, which means he gets +1 to his strength characteristic when he's actually attacking from the back or from the side of his enemy. So because of that, Crankjaw is striking at strength 3 with his last pistol as well as strength 4 with his fighting knife. Sleepy does have a toughness of 4 because he is a squat Venator hunter. So because that, Crankjaw needs to roll a 5 as well as a 4+ in order to hit, in order to wound with these attacks. Unfortunately for Crankjaw, he does not wound with the last pistol, but he does successfully wound with the fighting knife. Now the fighting knife of course gives him a -1 AP as well as 1 damage as well, so that drops Sleepy's armor save to 6 up. And unfortunately for the kiddo, she does fail Sleepy's armor save, so because of the wound does go through. When they roll the serious injury die, of course, he does suffer a serious injury, so because he is currently bleeding out, but because Crankjaw did charge directly into the back of Sleepy, he finishes him off the coup de grace at the same time putting him in action without cold result. So unfortunately for the kiddo, she does lose Sleepy on this battle report, but he'll make a full recovery no problem because it's out of action result, with the out cold result actually. So there's an overhead shot of the battlefield. As you can see, unfortunately Sleepy has been redded out as well as blacked out because he does take it out of action. So things are not looking really good right now for the kiddo. So for the kiddo's next activation, she decides to activate Dopey, which is a ferryman rig hand, who's represented by the same characteristics as Aster Felstern, the Dramatis Personae ferryman rig hand from Book of Desolation. She decides to do a basic action for her to stand up again to face directly against the fireworm, and decides to actually attack the fireworm. So as we're going over to shot of the battlefield, as you can see, fighter number 5 from the teal side has been grayed out. That's representing Dopey. Dopey does a 180 to face directly against fighter number 5, which is the fireworm, and she's going to open fire with a stub gun. So even though his name is not all that great, Dopey is actually critted out for kill, and the fireworm of course is facing off directly as Dopey, and they're basically just going to be shooting at each other at point blank range. So Dopey does have a ballistic skill of 4+ against the fireworm. Now he does get a +2 modifier because he is well within the short range characteristic of that stub gun. So because that, Dopey is now striking at a 2+ in order to hit the fireworm. And of course, Dopey has no problem hitting that, making that shot directly against the fireworm, but he does suffer a trigger, does trigger ammo test on that one. So because of that, he does need to make an ammo roll. But because the stub gun has the plentiful weapon trait, it automatically reloads, so there's no harm, no foul there. Now, when it comes to the wound roll on this one, the stub gun does have strength 3, and the fireworm does have a toughness of 3 as well. So because of that, Dopey will need to roll a 4 up in order to wound. And of course has no problem putting the wound directly onto the fireworm. So the fireworm of course has an armor save of 5 up with a combination of flak armor as well as initiate's mask, but unfortunately for my buddy Dark Lord Mac, the fireworm does fail his ammo roll, so because of that he does take a wound. So with the whip crack, the stub gun does fire and puts a blow directly into the middle of the fireworm's midsection. Now luckily for my buddy Dark Lord Mac, he did suffer a serious injury, so because of that the fireworm goes crashing face down into the cold hard decking. It is currently bleeding out, but that's a bad spot for him to be in because all that needs to happen is someone to charge directly into him. They can put him out of action if he's not careful. So here's over to shot of the battlefield. As you can see, fighter number 5 for the Ever Damned for the fireworm has been read out because he is currently suffering a serious injury. So we got 2 fighters out of action, 2 broken fighters, and 1 seriously injured fighter. So things are not looking too good for my buddy Dark Lord Mac as well as the Ever Damned. So in retaliation, Dark Lord Mac decides to activate Needle Vex, one of his Kim Fiends, which is a narco scum. This guy is armed with a Lasko, a telescopic sight, as well as a stub gun. And Needle Vex does 2 simple actions to basically do 2 simple movements. He takes 1 movement to climb up the ladder to get directly on top of the little walkway there, and another simple action to bump up right next to the gang relics. That way he can defend it from being defiled by any members of the Snow White and the Wild 7. And there's an overhead shot of the entirety of the battlefield. As you can see, fighter number 7 has been grayed out for the Ever Damned, and you can see that yellow arrow just kind of pointing and showing how he's climbed that ladder and moved directly towards the gang relic. So in response to this, the kiddo decides to do a group activation, activating both Happy, her champion, as well as Bashful, who's her hunter armed with a long rifle. And because of that group activation, Bashful will be going first. So Bashful actually does a basic action to take aim with his long rifle armed with infrared sight, and he's aiming his long rifle with infrared sight directly at Crankjaw, who is the narco scum is located in the middle of the battlefield. And the reason why this is the case is because, unfortunately, with the Necromunda rules, because he doesn't actually have the marksman ability, the first thing that Bashful has to hit is the closest target to him, and the closest target to him in this situation is Crankjaw. So the idea is that the kiddo is planning on engaging Crankjaw with Bashful, so that way Happy has a clear line of sight with his mining laser in order to shoot across the battlefield directly at Needle Vex. So Bashful does go first. He does take a basic action in order to aim his long rifle with infra sight. So because of that, Bashful does have a base of ++ on his Blissa skill. He gets +1 to hit because of the aim action. At the same time, the long rifle with his infrared sight removes partial cover because of the fact that he's got the infra sight. So because of that, it kind of drops Bashful's Blissa skill to a 3+ in order to hit Crankjaw and also to trigger knockback. The shot is good, and at the same time managed to trigger knockback as well. I believe the kiddo rolled a 4 on this one, so because of that, the damage is now doubled on the long rifle. The long rifle is striking at strength 4 with -1 AP as well as 2 damage, and Crankjaw only has a toughness of 3. So in order to wound, the kiddo needs to roll a 3+, and at the same time to get double damage with knockback. So needless to say, Bashful managed to get that wound off directly at Crankjaw. And because Crankjaw only has flak armor, he doesn't get an armor save, so it cuts right through him, and the kiddo rolls 2 injury dice for Crankjaw. And as you can see, Crankjaw does suffer an out of action result, but because he's a member of an alliance though, he doesn't have to really worry about any lasting injuries, so because that does goes out of action. So another fighter from the Everdam has been eliminated off the tabletop. So as you can see from the little mini map showing the entirety of the tabletop, things are looking very bad right now for the Everdam. They got 2 broken fighters, 3 fighters out of action, 1 seriously injured fighter as well, and the only thing that my buddy Dark Lord Mac has left is one of his narco scum. Now, Bashful's actions, as incredible as they were, it actually gets worse for my buddy Dark Lord Mac because it was part of a group activation. So Happy, the squat hunt champion, decides to go next. He takes a double action in order to open fire with kindness, which is his mining laser. So the closest target that Happy has a line of sight for is way across the battlefield directly towards Needle Vex, is actually overlooking the other gang relic as well. He will be shooting at long range as well, and there's a lot of cover between him as well as his target. Now, unfortunately for Happy though, even though he's targeting Needle Vex, to fire that mining laser, it is a double action, and the reason why is because it does have the unwieldy trait on it. So because that, Happy does have a base of 3+ on his Blissa skill, which is quite good. However though, the mining laser actually has -1 to hit at long range, so he's got to suffer that penalty. At the same time, Needle Vex also has partial cover too from those railings, which means that unfortunately adds -2 to the hit roll, so the kiddo will have to roll a 5+ in order to land that shot with Happy. So the kiddo rolls her d6 as well as her firepower dice and manages to roll a perfect 6 on the hit and manages to hit Needle Vex directly with that mining laser. Now that mining laser of course is striking at strength 3 with -3 AP and 3 damage, and Needle Vex only has a toughness of 3, so the kiddo needs to roll a 2 up in order to wound with Happy. Needless to say, the wound does go 3. Needle Vex, of course, does not receive any armor save, and the reason why is because even though he does have mesh armor, that -3 AP just cuts right through that, so because of that, Needle Vex does suffer 3 damage. And when the kiddo rolls a 3 injury dice, she gets 2 serious injuries as well as an out of action result, so because of that, Needle Vex does go out of action. Now, he is a member of the Alliance for the Narco Lords, so because it doesn't worry about taking any lasting injuries, but things are really complicated right now for Dark Lord Mac. So his overhead shot the entire of the battlefield. Boulevard is out of action, Garrote is out of action, Crankjaw as well as Needle Vex are out of action as well. The Fireworm is seriously injured, and the only one still standing on the tabletop is Asher the Drip, as well as Griever, as well as Cancer the Cleaver. But both those guys are broken, so they really can't do much of anything. So with Dark Lord Mac's very last activation, he decides to activate fighter number 8, which is Asher the Drip, who's located on the left-hand side, so he decides to activate that fighter. Now, Asher the Drip does take a simple movement action in order to move past through those columns there, and another basic action open fire with their last gun directly at Bashful, but unfortunately for her though, she misses her shot, so nothing much really came of it. So that takes directly to the end phase of turn number 2, and here's overhead shot of the entirety of the battlefield. We got a roll, of course, for bottle test to see exactly if anybody sticks around or if anybody runs away. Unfortunately for Dark Lord Mac, he does fail his bottle test, so because of that, it does trigger that to go off, so because all of his fighters on the tabletop do need to take a cool test to see if they actually stick around. At the same time, he also loses 1 point of reputation as well. To make matters worse for him, of course, when it does take for the bottle test, Griver, Canto Cleaver, as well as Ash for the Drip, a must test on a 7+, 7+ for Griver as well as Canto Cleaver, and 8+ for Ash for the Drip. Now, Griver as well as Canto Cleaver, they failed their cool test, so because of both of those Skinners flee off the tabletop. Ash for the Drip, however, with the 8+ cool allowance, actually sticks it up, manages to stick around and doesn't actually flee, which is actually quite bad for Dark Lord Mac. To make matters worse for Dark Lord Mac, when he rolls the injury die for the Fireworm, rolls another out of action result as well, and rolls a 16, which is out cold. So because of the Fireworm does no longer participate in the battle report, but he'll make a full recovery no problem. But that's just one less fighter that Dark Lord Mac has to use on the tabletop. And because of the end phase, of course, reinforcements do arrive. Taking the place of the Fireworm is Grumpy, so Grumpy actually ends up showing up on the tabletop, which of course using Hagthor Yarland characteristics or represent that fighter for this gang. At the same time, the Hunt Champion Sneezy also shows up on the tabletop with the Gesundheit, which of course is his Nightshade Chem Thrower. So things are looking quite good right now for the Wild 7. As for Dark Lord Mac, he only gets one fighter show up from his roster. That's TE the Executioner, which is one of his cutters, his arm with a flail, as well as a chain cleaver, a butcher's cleaver. But that's actually not enough for her to motivate him to stay on the tabletop. So with that, Dark Lord Max decides to call the game and decide to voluntarily leave the battlefield as well. Unfortunately, that does mean he loses that point of reputation because he did bottle out, and it also means that his gang relic does get defiled, but he doesn't want to lose any more fighters than he already has because he wants to be able to participate in next week's battle reports. So because of that, the battle report immediately ends with a victory for the Venators. So my little sister Kiddo, as well as Snow White and the Wild 7 has won up for this one. We're going to go directly to the post game because this battle report is now officially over.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
Alright, so now it's time for the post game. This is the part of the battle report we talk about what went well, what went poorly, what we can learn for the next time that we do battle. This is the after action report for battle report number 6, fought between the Kiddo as well as Dark Lord Mac. Unfortunately for my friend Dark Lord Mac, the Everdam did lose this battle report, so let's talk about exactly what happened to his gang. Now for Garou goes into convalescence and goes into recovery, so he will not be able to participate in his next battle report. Boulevard, the Fireworm, Neil Vex, all those characters make full recovery, so they're perfectly fine. And they'll be able to fight in the next battle report as well. Now, even though his gang did earn, members of his gang did earn advance experience points for this one, nobody in his gang did advance. And from his settlement, he did manage to rummage up 50 credits from his settlement as well as 1 point of reputation. Unfortunately for his Promethean cash, though, he did lose it to Snow White and the Wild 7 for losing this battle report. Now for his alliance, his Narcolords of course did require payment with the payment due special rule for the drawback for that alliance, and that drawback ended up costing Dark Lord Mac 20 credits, and the Everdead of course paid that 20 credits in order to maintain that alliance because the Narcolords have actually been paying dividends for the Everdamned for this campaign so far. Now from the trading post, he's able to score 50 credits from his settlement, and when combined with the 5 credits that he had from his stash, gave him 55 credits in total. With those 55 credits, he spent 20 credits in order to maintain his alliance with the Narcolords and put the other 35 credits back directly into the stash. Now for his reputation, he does earn 1 point of reputation from his settlement as well as 1 point of reputation for fighting against Snow White and the Wild 7 for the very first time. Unfortunately though, because he did bottle out, he did lose 1 point of reputation, which brings his grand total to 6 points of reputation in total. His new record now is at 1 win and 1 loss, and his new game rating now is at 1,945 points. Meanwhile, let's talk about Snow White and the Wild 7. So she did suffer 2 injuries on this one. Doc got Bitter Enmity, which means he gains Berserker skill anytime he fights against Corpse Grinder cults, and actually makes a full recovery from that as well. At the same time, Sleepy also makes a full recovery from his out cold results, so all of her fighters are perfectly fine. Now for advancements, Snow White did level up to level 1 and earned +1 to her toughness characteristic, making her toughness 4 now, at the same time also increasing her credit value to with additional 30 credits. Happy also leveled up to level 1 and decided to spend his experience points in order to roll on the shooting skills table, and he rolled up Marksman. So because he doesn't ignore target priority now, which is great for that character, at the same time also earned 20 credits for that character. And then finally, Bashful also leveled up to level 1 as well, becomes a specialist, and he actually rolled the fast shot skill from his shooting skills, so because that also increases his credit value by 20 credits as well, so Bashful can now shoot twice with that long rifle without having to aim. Now from her territory, from her settlement, she earned 50 credits from her settlement as well as 1 point of reputation, and she also managed to capture a Promethean cache from the Everdamned, which means that she actually has 3 sets of incendiary charges that she can use now in order to use on the tabletop, so looking pretty good for the kiddo. And at the same time, from her brand new territory, she got a Rogue Dock shop, which gives her D6 times 10 credits. So from that territory, she earned 3 credits from that, and also recruited a brand new Rogue Dock for a gang named Dr. Huntsman, which is a Rogue Dock that's now in her gang. Now from her alliance, she still maintains the alliance with the Abyssal Ferryman team. Now from the trading post, she earned 80 credits from her territories, as well as 30 credits from Grumpy's Fixer skill. She also got another 20 credits from the scenario, giving her a grand total of 130 credits in total. With those 130 credits, she spent 60 credits for a Suspenser for Happy now, so that because that kindness, his mining laser, now has a Suspenser, which means if fire that mining laser is only a basic action. She also spent another 25 credits for telescopic sights for both Sleepy, so that way he puts on his needle rifle, as well as for Doc, putting it directly on top of his Ironhead autogun, which means now that whenever they take a basic action, they get the short range modifier for long range shots now, which is quite good for them. With the leftover 20 credits that she had left over, she put that directly into her stash. Now, because of the Grumpy's Endless Innovation special rule, she managed to purchase an all-wheel steering for the glass coffin to increase its handling by 1 point. Now for reputation, she earns 1 reputation from the settlement as well as 1 from fighting against the Everdamned for the very first time, and she managed to get 3 reputation points from the scenario, giving her a grand total of 6 reputation in total. Her new record now is at 1 win and 1 loss, and her new gang rating now is at 1,955 points. So there you guys have it. That is Battle Report number 6, which pretty much is going to almost to concluding the second week of our Necromunda Community Event, hosted by Dr. Drybrush and myself. And as always, please feel free to include us with comments or show us photos or videos of the projects you're working on for the Necromunda Community Event. We'd love to hear from you guys to see exactly what kind of things you guys are cooking up in your own campaigns and with your own gaming groups. So I'm Commander Cheapskate. That's good for this video, guys. I will catch you guys next one. Peace out and stay classy.